Okay, we're learning in the middle of the sugya of the kings and the peoples who don't have a portion in the world to come. We're discussing the kings of the kingdom of Yehuda. Let me bring up the page for sharing. Tonight's class is sponsored by Svika and Rivka first from Los Angeles. Hashem benched them with Hatzlacha, Begashmis, Baruchnias, Nacht from the children of Richsiam and Shem Taivis. Yes, Barbara, you have a question? You have your arm up, your hand up?
Yes, you mentioned these people don't have a share in the world to come. One of the things I was reading about Lashon Ora is people who speak Lashon Ora may not have a portion in the world to come, which is why it's so important not to do that.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we're talking about more famous people for great acts, but and obviously there's different levels of what that means about Lashon, comparing Lashon Hara to some of the sins we're discussing in our classes. But yes, Lashon Hara is considered a very strong transgression. One has to be very careful with it, as hard as it may be. Okay, so we're middle of the different later kings here, different later kings of Yehuda. Again, the kings obviously start from King David, Solomon, and then afterwards, kind of good kings, bad kings, going further. The last few good kings was Chizkiyahu that we're learning a lot about. Yeshayahu was further down the line, and Yeshayahu was pretty much the last good king. After Yeshayahu comes his children, grandchildren. It's 4 kings. Some of them are kings for a very short period of time, a few months. Yehoyakim and Tzidkiyahu. Yehoyakim and Tzidkiyahu are both kings for about 12 years. They're brothers, and Yehoyakim is really horrible king. But the question is why, and we're learning about the different things he's did. Sleeping with everyone, incest, idol worship, I mean, torturing the prophet Yirmiyahu. These are things that have been mentioned, but other things, burning the Eicha. So the Gemara asked the question, Amalei Rava le Rabba bar Mari. Rava asked the question to Rabba, the son of Mari. If Yehoyakim is such a bad person, we said before that he says to God, I don't need you for anything. If you want to say that you're giving us the son, so there's a special gold that could replace the son. He was really lahachis. We're going to learn some more things about him. He did things extremely to anger God. And so why isn't he mentioned as one of the kings that doesn't have a portion in the world to come? Why is he any better than the kings that we did mention, Menashe, etc.? So the Gemara says, Mishum dechsiv be. If you want to tell me, because it says, it's a question mark. Yesei divrei hayakim v'tei'avasav, and the rest of the acts of Yehoyakim and his abominations. Whenever we say the word te'ova, it's different things of sexual misconduct. Asher asav v'nimtzalav, and things that were found on him. So he says, what's it mean v'nimtzalav? What do it mean things that are found on him? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar said different things. Chad Amar, one says, they have coming from two different angles. Shechakak shem ha'avodah zara ha'lamaseh, that he tattooed the name of an idol on his penis. V'chadam, and the other one said, Shechakak shem shemayim ha'lamaseh, he put God's name. So he said Yud Kei Vav Kei on his penis. He tattooed it on his penis. So one meaning to say that they're two different. Rashi doesn't explain the two different attitudes. So the Rashi says, why don't we mention Yehoyakim? Of all the horrible things we learned about last week that he did, why isn't he on the list of people who don't have a portion of the world to come? So the Gemara says, question. I mean, you want to tell me? I mean, the pasuk doesn't stop saying things that he did. Because we talk about him, therefore we shouldn't count him. So one opinion is Shem Avodah Zara Gufa. He tattooed the name of an idol on his body to show that he's so connected to idol worship that he's ready to tattoo it on his most private place. And according to the other opinion, Shem Shemayim Mishum Bizoin. He wanted to shame God. and so show that he has there's such a disrespect for God that he'll even tattoo God's name on his penis. So he answers. Rabbi Bamari said, "B'melachim le'shemati." I don't have the answer. Why Yehoiakim or other kings possibly have not been mentioned on the list of people who don't have a portion of the world to come. But there are certain people that are non-kings. Hedyot means commoners, well-known commoners that we would wonder why they're not mentioned. For instance, why was Micha, which we're going to learn about now, why is Micha not mentioned as one of the people who don't have a portion to the world to come? And the answer is, here we find an amazing thing, because his house was known, not just that it was open, it was known to be open to everyone. He was very hospitable. Everyone had anyone who was hungry. Pita means his bread was found for anyone who needed. Whoever was traveling El Halavim to the Levites, it says that we're going to do a quick review who Micha was in a second. Before we go to Micha, I just want to bring down a few things it says about Yehoiakim that's not mentioned over here. So we said the things that he did is that he tattooed either an idol or God on his person in a way of either showing his connection to the idol or to shame God. It says, again, he had relations with his mother, with his daughters, with his sisters, with his daughter-in-laws. It says that one of the things that's brought down about him is that they found on him also kalayim. He specifically wore clothing that were forbidden al pi Torah. But because the generation that he lived in, like we said, were tzaddikim, were righteous, the chayrish shemasker, so because they were tzaddikim, so he hid it. He only found it later when he died, because he was scared they would stop him. So although he was king, he didn't have the absolute, it's obviously in every situation of royalty, it's complicated to figure out how much power the king really has. But it shows that he still was scared of the generation that they only found it on him later when he died. That literally he would wear kalayim specifically. He would wear clothing made up of wool and linen just to anger God. So Rabbi Bamari says, I don't know why Yehoiakim is not mentioned. The Gemara will mention later why he wasn't mentioned. The Gemara is not going to give up on this question. But he talks about Micha. So let's just go quickly. Who's Micha? Micha is kind of in the Medrash all the time. He's brought down in Shoftim, so you could check it up afterwards. Micha's idol. Basically, the story of Micha is that Micha, according to different opinions, is either Micha was there. Micha is the person when Moshe Rabbeinu asks God, "What is this that you're doing to the children? You're killing the children." And to say that the Egyptians were killing the children, he said to God, "Why are you allowing the Egyptians to kill the children?" God said, "These are children that maybe shouldn't live." So Moshe says, "How could you say that?" So God said, "Take one out." He took out Micha. Micha was placed in the wall. And when Micha came out, he became not just an idol worshiper, he was a troublemaker his whole life. When Moshe threw in the piece of parchment that said, or the piece of clay that said Ale Shor, he wanted to get Yosef's coffin out of the water. He took it and threw it into the fire, and it made the golden calf. He was the one who made the golden calf. Others say he already made the Pesach Micha. He made the statue already when he was in Egypt, and he took it with him into the sea. He crossed the sea with it. So he did all kind of different things Micha did, but basically the story that we know of Micha and the story in the book of Judges is he steals money from his mother. His mother finds out. She takes part of the money. She makes this idol that is in his house, and then this again, because he's hospitable, this person who later we find out is possibly Moshe Rabbeinu's grandson, who comes to, his name is Ben Gershom. Gershom was Moshe's son. That's a whole complicated story as it is. He ends up he makes him the priest of this idol. And then the people from Dan travel through and they see him and they see the priest and they see the idol. The whole long story, basically, he builds a whole house of idol worship. At some point, the people from Dan steal his idol and bring it to Dan. And we don't even know how long the house of Micha stood. It's possible it stood all the way till the destruction of the first temple. But definitely stood in the whole time of Shiloh, which is the time of 300 years that the tabernacle was in Shiloh. So he has this place of idol worship, and he's been doing it from day one. I mean, he's ready. He's the person who made it possible for the golden calf. So why isn't he mentioned? In such a person he's not a king, but he's been around so much and causing so much damage. Why is he not mentioned? So the Gemara answers because he was hospitable. Being hospitable, notwithstanding of all his sins, God forgave him for that. To the level, obviously, he wasn't forgiven all the way, but he wouldn't be mentioned as a person who doesn't have a portion of the world to come. So Rashi says, "B'malachim le'shamati." I don't know the answer for all the kings that are not mentioned. Why I can't answer you why Yehoiakim is not on that list. But Behidyotis, non-kings mean commoners. Shemati, Micha. Why, for instance, is not Micha? Bahadi Arbe Dyotis Masnisim. Our Mishnah mentions 4 commoners, right? We've mentioned Doeg, we mentioned Bilam. So why don't we mention Micha? So the Gemara answers because Pitay Matsuy Loiver Drachim. His food was available for anyone passing through. So much so that this grandson of Moshe, who ends up by Micha, is only because he came for food. Sheikol ha'olam, Rashi says, the whole world. What does it mean the whole world? He didn't have a kitchen for the whole world. But he didn't have a discrimination. Any person who that person may be, he or she, whatever their background is, kol ha'olam means any possible person. Misarchimetzla was able to be a guest by him. Like it says, kol ha'over v'shav. Whoever was passing through El Halavim Zu Micha, this is referring to Micha. That anyone who was passed through, Micha gave him a warm meal. And because of that, he's not mentioned on the people who don't have a portion of the world to come. Rab Steinsaltz brings down in his notes, the expression is not from a verse called Oiver V'shav Halavim, whoever passes by the Levites, but it appears to capture the actions of Micha, as even in the Bible is related that guests would arrive at his home. In other words, the Levite youth and members of the tribe of Dan, and he hosted them all. So again, the story that I told you, the people from Dan, the time of the judges is a subject of its own. It's a very complicated time in the Jewish history. The people weren't settled, the tribes were divided, there was no leadership. The leadership only came in times of crisis by the judges. So the people of Dan came and they stole Micha's statue. But how did they steal Micha's statue? Because he was hospitable. Because they ended up in his house eating a meal when they were spying. They sent out 5 spies to try to find if they could go capture their land. There's still the time of the judges, not all the parts of Eretz Yisrael were captured. So he quotes another pasuk. The pasuk says in Zechariah, "Va'over bayam tzara," he shall pass through the sea with affliction. Vihika bayam galim, and he shall strike the waves in the sea. What is this referring to? Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Zeh pislei shemicha." This is talking about the pestle of Micha, that it passed through the splitting of the Red Sea. So he was, again, Moshe took him out of the wall. God took him out of the wall at Moshe's request. And he takes him out of the wall, and he built the golden calf, and he builds the pesel Micha. But all that notwithstanding, he's a kind person, a giving person, and therefore he's not on the list. Tanya, we learned, Rabbi Yonasan Omer, Rabbi Yonasan says, that Migrav is the area where Micha had his temple. The Shiloh Shloisha Milim. So Micha's place is in the city called Migrav. Shiloh is where the tabernacle, remember the tabernacle that Moshe built, that we're learning about now, makes its way over the Jordan in Joshua's time. It goes to a few places. It finally settles in Shiloh. Shiloh's today is part of what we call the West Bank. In Shiloh, it's there for 300 years. It's not a structure. It's a kind of a structure. It's not the same Mishkan as Moshe built, but it's the parts that Moshe built. But it has additions. It has some sort of stone walls. And it's there, and it's destroyed in the time of Eli, which is one of the last judges. And then comes Shmuel, and then David, and of course, Solomon builds the temple. And then the tabernacle kind of is just moving around in Nov and Givon, and then it gets buried. Nothing that Moshe makes is destroyed. But the distance between Migrav, where Micha has his temple, and Shiloh is only Shloisha Milim. It's not a far distance, it's 3 miles. And he says that and because of that, the close distance, the close space they are between each other, the smoke of Micha's sacrifices to idols and the smoke of the tabernacle sacrifices to God were mixing. So here we have the smoke going up together. It's a famous Gemara. So Rashi says, Zeh Pislei Shemicha. The verse that we're talking about in Zechariah is referring to the statue from Micha. Here Rashi tells us the story a bit about Micha. Kishakasav Moshe Hashem, when Moshe wrote the name of God. And through throwing in the name of God on a parchment, on a cheres, on a piece of clay, he threw it into the Nile to bring up the coffin of Yosef. Means Yosef, the son of Jacob, right? So he went, Micha was like always that shadow, right? He was shadowing Moshe, and he goes and he takes that piece of parchment or the piece of material, and he hides it. That he took the name of God that Moshe wrote, he took it through the Red Sea. He went with it. And what did he do it? He threw it in. Because Moshe wrote not just the name of God, Moshe wrote Alei Shur. Alei Shur means come up ox, which was what Yaakov called his son Joseph. He called him Ben Parot, he called him Alei Shur. So because of that, he went and he threw in that name of God with Alei Shur, and out came a golden calf. Lashon Acher. And another opinion is that what did Micha take? Asa Pesel. He already made the statue. Although the story is his mother made the statue, had someone carve it, but maybe that happened in Egypt. But he already took the pesel, the statue, with him from Egypt. Garav, where's Garav? That's where Micha's house of worship was. The Garav who pisle shemicha kavua ubeshtilehu mishkan. So here we have pesel Micha. Again, the people from Dan stole it, so that's why it ended up in Garav. And so we have it was still called pesel Micha. So you have the statue of Micha, the idol, and you have Shiloh, and you have the smokes mixing. What do the angels say about that? The angels said, "Bikshu malchei sharas l'dechafoy." They wanted to push. They wanted to get rid of Micha. The angels had it with him. He's sitting here and he's sacrificing, and his smoke is mixing with the smoke of the Mishkan. God says, hold on, Aaron. God says to the angels, let him. Sorry? The sound's not coming over right?
Sounds like I hear your words, but it sounds.
Barbara, you also hearing bad sound?
No, you sound clear to me.
Yes, Aaron, I think it's your connection. So God says, Hanichilai, let him be. Why? Because his bread is found by people. So even the angels were angry that his smoke is mixing with the smoke of the Mishkan. God says, let him be. He's hospitable. He feeds people. And because of this, means what's al davar zeh? Because of the pesel, the Micha, that they allowed the statue of Micha, and they allowed the smokes to be mixed. When the tribes, and again, in this story in the Judges, quickly, the story of Judges is that a young woman known as the Pelegish Begiva, it's this incident where a young woman is, I believe, raped and murdered by the tribe of Benjamin, and the people of the other tribes go to battle with the tribe of Benjamin, and for the honor of this woman, because this guy went and sent parts of the body all over to show what the tribe of Benjamin did. The tribe of Benjamin kills 40,000 soldiers of the 11 tribes. And so the question is, the question is that they take the honor of this young woman, but they don't take the honor of God. So God says to the tribes, that's why they lost 40,000 soldiers when they fought against Binyamin in the story Pelegish Begiva. God said, my honor doesn't bother you. The fact that Micha has this whole house of idol worship and the smoke is mixing with the smoke of the Mishkan, that doesn't bother you. But this girl does bother you. That there's anything wrong. Of course, it was horrible what they did to this young girl in Binyamin. But God says, why aren't you bothered by God's honor as well? And because of that, although eventually the Jewish people basically beat the tribe of Binyamin in this war, it ended up causing tremendous division in the Jewish people, so much so that they didn't marry into the tribe of Benjamin because of the story for many, many years. But God says, why when it comes to my honor, you don't stand up? So that's just a side note, so to say. The Gemara says this. So the Rashi says, The angels wanted to push Micha, basically punish him for what he did. So it says, the fact that the Jewish people didn't protest, no one came in, they didn't come in with armies to knock down Micha's house of worship. In the story of the fight between the tribes and Benjamin, 40,000 people were killed because God, so to say, was lahavdil, offended of the Jewish people. Again, this is something that comes up all the time when everyone is when people will stamp their feet or protest about certain things, but when it comes to Torah things, everyone says let everyone do whatever they want. So it's plegish begiva that everyone says absolutely not, and it's, of course, you can't just molest a woman like that. But why also don't you concern yourself with honor of God? Because of that, although Benjamin was wrong, but nevertheless 40,000 soldiers died from the Jewish people. So I see the commentaries. It says over here. Some people say that the point isn't if Micha has a portion in the world to come. He doesn't have a portion in the world to come. But we don't mention him because he was hospitable. But not everyone agrees with that. And he says that the Ein Yaakov and Tosfos hold that he does have a portion in the world to come because he was hospitable. Also, the story says, when he says, the fact that he says the person came from Beit Lechem to Micha's place, the grandson of Moshe, is again because there was food. I mean, the food he wasn't just happened to be hospitable. He was known to be hospitable. So much so that people traveled when they needed food, when they needed something, they traveled all the way to his place in Grove to be able to have his to benefit from his hospitality. Others say that also the angels didn't want to hurt Micha. They just wanted to separate the smoke. It's a deeper idea. It means to say you have the smoke that mixes between the idols and the Mishkan. So they want to punish Micha. God says, don't punish him. He feeds people. Others say they just wanted to separate the smoke. God says, let his smoke be, because he's hospitable. It shows the power of hospitality and feeding people. And here the Gemara is going to go into teach us an amazing thing about this. So Rav Steinzat says, some explain that they sought to push away the smoke so it will not intermingle with the smoke of the altar in the tabernacle. The Marsha says this. Nevertheless, God said, let it be. Let his smoke mix. It goes to show you when a person is hospitable or if a person is not hospitable, what that means. Now here we learn about the people that were not hospitable. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, it's a famous Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, from the famous Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. How great is the Gima to give someone food? The Rebbe would quote this Gemara all the time. Two families were asked to distance themselves from the Jewish people because they didn't feed. What's the story? The story about it is Ammon and Moav. Shenemar talks about when God says Ammon and Moav are the descendants of Lot, right? Lot has incest with his daughters in the cave after the destruction of Sodom. Two nations are born from that. They're on the southern, western southern border of Eretz Yisrael, today known as Jordan. And God says these people can't marry into the Jewish people. That's why one of the things he said about David was that Ruth was a Moavi, but the limud was that only a male Moav, because the males didn't feed, and not a Moavia, not a female. But the nation of Moab, as the males were not allowed to convert. So why? So the Torah says why. Because they didn't give you food. When the Jewish people passed through the desert, they passed their distant cousins, Lot's children, right? Lot is Moshe, was Avram Avinu's nephew / brother-in-law. And he says they don't feed the Jewish people. God doesn't forget that. God says they're not hospitable. They can't convert. I don't even want their descendants to convert because they didn't. They didn't give you bread. So it shows you the goydel legima, the power of feeding. Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan says, he adds to what Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma says that marchekes is akroivim, that people who don't feed, it pushes away those who are close. The Gemara will explain what that means. And it brings those who are distant close. And it causes God to close his eyes to the wicked. And even for the power of feeding someone, God will even give prophecy to the prophets of the idols of the Baal. And when you don't feed someone, something that is a shogeg, something that is considered intention, is considered unwitting transgression. You didn't want to do it. Is considered intentional. And the Gemara is going to explain what those 4 cases is. So I say the Rebbe always said that the next piece of the Gemara, we have to turn the page now. That the way we learn this really is that Lot, it says that God doesn't want to speak to Lot. God doesn't speak to Avram as long as Lot is with him. How do we know that? It says after Lot separates from Avram in the Parsha Lech Lecha, right? There's the whole disagreement between the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Avram. Avram says, you go your way and I'll go the opposite way. We shouldn't mingle. So Lot goes to Sodom. Avram says, I'll stay not too far. I'll keep an eye on you. He does save him later. So it says after Lot leaves, God talks to Avram. Why? Rashi says, why after Lot leaves? As long as Lot was with Avram, God says, I don't want to talk to you. If Lot is in your household, I'm not coming around. But when Lot leaves, God comes back to Avram. So what do we see clearly? That God caused, there was a rechika. There was a distance between Avram and Lot. But had they fed the Jewish people, had they given the Jewish people food, God would have overlooked that distance. But because they didn't, they stayed distant. We see the power of food. So God legima, that's what the Rebbe always used to say. When you meet people, when you make a fabreng and you have to have food, when you sit together, you have to bring food, bring a little food to a shir, because God legima, so great to give food. It causes closeness. Even people that are distant become close. So now the Gemara is going to explain. What does it mean, merachekes is a kroiv? What does it mean, not giving food, obviously? Will distance those who are close. Let's turn the page. So he says, that's Ammon and Moav, what we just learned about. The two sons of the descendants of Lot, from Lot's daughters, they are the distance. That those who were close were distance. What do you mean they were close? They were family. The Rashi says, Ammon and Moav, Kroivim L'Yisrael, they're family, they're Lot's kids. Shebomi Lot ben Achi Avram, Avram's nephew. God distanced them. He says they cannot convert. They can't join the Jewish people because they didn't feed. We can't say they're the most close. Why? Because Midian is literally Avram's descendants, B'nai Keturah. Midian was closer in relatives than Ammon and Moav, but nevertheless, that they were close in distance, Rashi says. They were mamish close to the Jewish people. They live on the border. There, if you look at the map again, what's over here? So where's Ammon and Moav? Ammon and Moav here's Ammon in the light purple. That's the color. And Moav is right here in the light, whatever, brown green. So this was what today would be east on the east side of the Jordan River by Jordan. This is the Jordan River, this blue line. This is the Dead Sea. So they're mamish close, and Midian is a little further, evidently. So, but they were close to Eretz Yisrael, but nevertheless they can't convert. So that's what it means that merachik is a kroivim. So either they were close in family, but again, the Rebbe brings down that they were distant already in the times of Avram, but they would have been brought closer had they give the Jewish people food. It means God doesn't say don't let them in because I didn't like Lot, because they didn't give them food. What's in Mikareves is rechaikim, that those who are distant become close. Yisro is for Midian. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, "B'schar kirilan v'yechalachem." What's the story everyone remembers? We didn't learn it too long ago. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Midian. He runs away from Egypt. In Midian, he meets Zipporah and the daughters of Yisro. And what happens? Yisro says, "What's the matter with you guys? Why don't you call him in for bread? Why don't you bring him in for a meal?" And because of that, Yisro becomes Moshe's father-in-law because he gave him bread. And eventually the children of Yisro, the descendants of Yisro, we're going to learn, convert. And not only they convert, they become scholars that sit in the Sanhedrin in the temple. So B'schar Kirin Lam V'yechel Echem, because Yisro says, call Moshe and give him bread, he fed him, again, the power of feeding. Zachu b'nei banav v'yashav lishkas hagazis. That the descendants of Yisro come, and not only does Yisro, but they convert, and they end up sitting in the Lishkas Hagazis. Lishkas Hagazis is the part of the temple that's the Lishka, that the section of the stones that has, part of it is part of the temple, part of the room was considered chol, mundane. And that's where the high court of the Sanhedrin, the 71 people of the Sanhedrin sat in the Lishkas Hagazis, meaning to say that not only were his children, descendants, converts, but they actually made their way to be on the highest of the court. What's the highest court? The highest court is the Sanhedrin of 71. Shenemar, how do we know that they reached that level? So it says, so it says, and the families of the scribes who dealt in Yabitz, in the place, Tirasim, Shimasim, Shuchasim, these are different names of families. Hema HaKinim, these are the people from Kinim, which we'll see means Yisrael. Habai Machmas Avi Beis Rechav. They come from the family of Rechav. And we see who's Kinim. It says over there, V'nei Keni Chais and Moshe, from the family of Moshe's father-in-law. Olam Meir Hatman, they came from the city of the palm trees. As Bnei Yehuda, Midbar Yehuda, Asher ben Negev, they came from the south. Arad, Be'ech ve'eshav v'sam, they came and they joined the Jewish people. So what do we see? That the descendants of Yisrael joined the Jewish people. And not only did they join the Jewish people, they end up sitting in the Lishkas Hagazis. They end up sitting in the temple as in the Sanhedrin. Why? All because Yisrael fed Moshe. So even though they were Rachaikim, Midian was Rachik in distance, or you could say Rachik also because of being an enemy to the Jewish people, but the fact that they gave bread, and again, the Mepharshim bring down the idea of bread, Torah. That's why because they gave bread, and Torah is considered bread, they were zeichet to not just be part of the Jewish people, but to be people that fed in that gave the Jewish people Torah. Okay, so the Rashi says, this is all connected to Moshe when he meets about his father-in-law. That Moshe's father-in-law's family ends up becoming part of the Sanhedrin. Hema Kinim, they're the family of the Kinim. Haba Machmas Avi Beis Rachav. The Kinim Elu Banav Shal Yisrael. Kinim were the descendants of Yisrael. Dechsivu Bnei Kini Chais and Moshe Ubanav Shal Yisrael Hein Banav Shal Rachav. And Yisrael and Rachav, they're the same descendants. Dechsiv Kinim Abai Machmas Avi Beis Rachav. Dechsiv Leveis Harachavim Asher Yirmiyahu Hikayam Hashem. He's just quoting verses to prove that this is the family of Yisrael. Yanish Shemati Mitzvahs Avichem Leikaris Ish Liyinoidav ben Rachav. They won't be cut off from the family of Yinoidav ben Rachav. Lifanai Kol Hayamim. They'll always be part of the Jewish people. V'aminim b'sifri. The Medrash says the Efsher Nachrim Heim v'Nichnasum Heichel. Could it be that they were Gentiles and they sat in the sanctuary? No, only Jewish people were in the sanctuary. No, what's the point? That they converted. They became close because of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was fed by Yisrael. And they sat in the Sanhedrin, and they taught Torah. Just on a side note, in the news, those who are following news in Eretz Yisrael, what's happening in Syria and the Golan of the Druzim. So the Druzim, the sect of the Druzim, they're actually believe as to be followers of Yisrael. They don't follow Moshe, they follow Yisrael. That's one of the bases of the belief of the Druzim, is as followers of Yisrael. Okay, this is just a side note. So Reb Steinzal says, this is the word in a medrash from the fact that it says the Taitharis, which means elders who convene in the gate of to judge the people. Meaning, say the Lishkas Hagazis, that's where they're sitting. Others explain Taitharis is Tithrim is the plural of Tara, which is Aramaic term as gates. As the chamber of the Hunstones, there were two gates, one that opened into the profane area outside the temple, and one opened into the sacred courtyard of the temple. So the Lishkas Hagazis, like I said, was part chol and part holy. Okay, so therefore we have two things. So we see that feeding food, the fact that Ammon and Moav, Lot's descendants, don't feed the Jewish people, God says they can never convert. Yisro feeds Moshe, therefore not only does his family convert, but they actually become members of the Sanhedrin. So what's it mean that Rabbi Yochanan says, Umalemes einay min Hashem, he closes, so to say, he averts his eyes from the wicked, from Micha. Again, Micha was wicked, God doesn't judge him. And according to Tosfos, he does have a portion in the world to come because he fed the Jewish people. He said, let it be, let his smoke be, let him be. Why? Because he feeds people. What's it mean to Mashur Shechina al Baal? Right? What does it mean that God gives prophecy to the prophets of the Baal? So this is a complicated story. Quickly remind everyone who studied Navi that the story of Ido the Navi. What story? Ido, again, we learned about, I think it's over here in Kings, right? So the Kings 1, chapter 13, you can look it up later. It says, V'hine ish alikim ba Yehuda, a person, a prophet from the people of Judah, came to the house of worship in Beis Kel of Yeravam. Remember, we learned Yeravam was the first king of the Israel who built the two calves in Beit El and Dan and stopped the Jewish people. He was the one who was hand chosen by Achia Shaloni and God to replace Shlomo and be the king of the 10 tribes. But his ego gets the better of him. We learned all this before. And he builds houses of worship for idols, just that people shouldn't go to the temple, so he shouldn't look small by Rechavam, the son of Shlomo. And so God sends a prophet to him. You could read the whole story in Kings 1, chapter 13. But the story goes basically in a nutshell. His name was Ido the prophet. God tells him to go to Yeravam, prophesies. There's going to be a split in this altar that Yeravam builds. Things are going to fall down. The Deshen is going to fall down, and he's going to prophesy to admonish Yeravam. God tells him. Yeravam gets affected for a second. He gets emotionally affected. He says, "Come, join me for a meal." God tells him, "Don't eat. Whatever you do, you're not allowed. Just say the prophecy, perform the miracle, and go back to Judah." He says, "No, I can't eat." This old prophet from Baal hears this whole story, and he knows that he's going to manipulate the situation. He sends back someone to bring this Ido back, and he says, "Come eat with me." He says, "I can't." God said, "Can't eat." He says, "God prophesies to me. He said that you should eat." And for some reason, Ido listens to this old man. He obviously didn't. He didn't look like a false prophet. And he eats with him, and as soon as he eats with him, God now gives prophecy to the prophet of the Baal. This old man gets prophecy. And that's what it means, God gives prophecy to the prophet of the Baal. And he tells him, because you ate, you're not going to find the burial, you're going to die. And he leaves, and lions come and attack him, and he's killed. And actually the old man regrets it in some way, and he buries him. And he asks later to be buried next to him. It's a very weird story, complicated story. Not so much about Ido the Navi, and not so much about the old man is a complicated person. What's his agenda? Is he pro Yeravam? Is he pro God? He's sensitive to the Ido. He knows that he dies. He brings him back. He buries him. He wants to be buried next to him. I mean, you could read the whole story in Kings, but Kings 1, chapter 13. But basically, God gives him prophecy. Why? So even though God told Ido not to eat, but the very fact that he fed him, not understanding that he was trying to manipulate the situation. And because the Ido died, Yeravam never repented. He just, whatever, that kind of killed the spell that this Ido affected in Yeravam, and he never repents, and that was it, it's over. Again, we learned the Gemara, God tries to get him to come back, he doesn't come back. So God gives him prophecy because he fed Ido, even though God told Ido not to eat, and even though his feeding him was probably to manipulate the situation, but he fed him. So he says, Umashur Shechina al Nevi Abal. This is the story of Ido the prophet. That and when he comes back to the old man, the false prophets, he's eating by him. God speaks to the prophet, to this false prophet. And he tells him, because you ate, you're going to be killed. Rashi says, again, Ido is sent by God to prophesy in Beis Kel, is where Yeravam built the house of worship for the idols. Shecharev, that's going to be destroyed in Peshahemed by Yeravam Slamim, because Yeravam put up idols, therefore it's going to be destroyed. Tichsiv, as it says in, again, Kings 13, V'hini isha likim bam Yehuda. This prophet comes, a man of God, to prophesy and try to bring Yeravam, the first king of Israel, back to the fold. Vayemer Mizbeach, Mizbeach, he prophesies, he says, altar, altar. And we know that this is Ido the Navi, that's his name. Not sure why there's the emphasis on this. It must be something that's beyond maybe our understanding. And the false prophet comes. He fools him. So again, he's manipulating the situation. He brings him back. And he makes Idoi go against what God told him clearly, do not eat. He brings him back, don't go back, and he eats. But because he fed him, even though he fed him in a manipulating way, it shows you the power of food. God gives him prophecy. And again, the prophet is a complicated person. When Idoi gets killed by the lion, what happens is the lion kills Idoi, but doesn't eat him, and doesn't eat his donkey. And they find them, it was like a scene. The lion standing there, the donkey standing there, the body of the prophet's dead. And to show that God just killed him, it wasn't a wild animal that was hungry. And then the old prophet comes and brings him back and buries him in a respectful way. So that's the story of a person that is a bad person, but because he fed Ido, even though he fed Ido against God's will, but God says he fed someone. I mean, it shows you the power of feeding. What is Vishigigase Eilazadan? That's something that's a shogeg, something that you did by mistake, is considered intentional. This is a sad story, a very sad story, the story of Yonasan and David, right? So Yonasan and David are brother-in-laws and best friends. Yonasan is the son of Saul, the first king of the Jewish people, who's going to inherit the crown. David is the brother-in-law who is anointed by Samuel. Saul finds out about it. He wants to kill David. So the famous prophecy, the famous story that we read in the Haftorah of Machar Chodesh, whenever Rosh Chodesh is on Sunday, we have a special Haftorah called Machar Chodesh. Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, which is the story of David and Yonasan. David and Yonasan, Yonatan tells David, I checked with my father, he's going to kill you. Basically, this is when Yonatan tells David he has to hide, he has to run away. David has no food. So he goes to the city of Nov. We learned before, the city of Nov people believe is either what is today Ramat Shlomo, which is a section right outside the old city, or Givat Safartit, which is French Hill. These are all places that are right over Temple Mount. The city of Nov is the city of the Kohanim, of priests. David runs there and he gets food from them, and he gets a sword from Achimelech. Doeg, the wicked Doeg, which is a Doeg Adomi, which is also a great Torah scholar, but he's with Saul and he's jealous of David. We learned about him a few months ago that he talks Lashon Hara about David. When David is the one who kills Goliath, he fans Saul's jealousy, and he goes and he tells Saul that the city of Nov gave refuge to David. Saul goes berserk, and he sends Doeg to kill all the Kohanim. Because of that, Saul gets killed for the punishment of killing the city of Nov. We've learned earlier that David gets punished for causing Nov to be destroyed, for being part of the story, although he didn't do anything, he just ate food. So what happens is, obviously the food didn't save the city of Nov in that situation. So what happens is, but the whole story never would have happened if Yonasan would have given David food. He comes back to tell David, you have to run away. Why didn't you come with a care package? Why don't you come, David, and you're running away now? Here's a few loaves of bread. You need food for the way. Because he didn't give him food, and he didn't do it on purpose. It was a shogeg. Because of that, David goes to the city of Nov. God considers it as if a zadeh. Because if he would have given a care package to David, David never would have gone to Nov. Nov would never have been destroyed. Saul would never have been killed the way he was killed by the Plishtim in the battle in the Gilboa. And because of that, why? Because the old happened because Yehonasan made a mistake. It was a mistake by not giving a care package to David. That's the story in short. What's that? The Rav Yehuda said the name Rav says. It's funny how the Gemara says it. He didn't have to give him a care package. He could have just lent him a few loaves of bread. If he would have just lent him 2 loaves of bread, Nov never would have been destroyed, because David would have never gone to Nov. He would never have been hungry. Irakon in the city of the Kohanim, and then Doeg wouldn't have been. God also was upset at David later when the story we learned about Yishbi ben Nov is that David was punished because Doeg was killed, even though Doeg was a bad person. He was a rasha, but he also was a Talmud Chacham. Shaul wouldn't have been killed. It says obviously he would have been dethroned because he was dethroned for other reasons, things he did. They didn't have to be killed in such a manner. You didn't have to be beheaded by the Philistines in the Gilboa. B'shleishis banim, his kids didn't have to be killed. There were other ways for David to become king. Why were they killed in such a way? Because Yonasan didn't feed David. David had to go to Nov, and because Saul killed the city of Nov, he had to be punished. So again, we see how not feeding caused such destruction. Shishagag, he made a mistake. He didn't loan. It's funny. The Gemara is saying like loan. It means he was a prince. He came. If you read the Haftarah, he was coming from a feast. He could have just grabbed a few chalitz with him, right? He could have taken a few pieces of bread. But we're not talking about a major loan here. But he could have even loaned him 2 loaves of bread. But Nenesh, he was punished. Rav Yehuda, Levu Lashon Levia. He could have lent him. They wouldn't have been killed. The city of Nov. Why? The only reason why Doeg had to come borrow bread from the Kohanim was because he had no food. But had Yonasan given him food, he never would have went to Nov. And Doeg wouldn't have slandered them. He wouldn't have been killed for that sin. He would have been killed for other sins. He would have died another way. Like the Mepharshim say, he would have died, but not in such a manner, not being killed like that by the Philistines. So he says over here, although he performed other transgressions, Reb Steinzal says they would have led merely to his dethroning, his death in the war was punishment for the massacre of Nov. He quotes the Marsha. Okay, so we know why Micha is not counted, and we see the power of feeding. Let's just go a little further. We have 15 minutes. Let's take advantage of it. Okay, we mentioned before last week that the father of Chizkiyahu is Achaz. Chizkiyahu again is the righteous king. God wants to make the Mashiach. Achaz is Amatzia, I think it's Amatzia's son, right? And he's the one who put the idols on the roof of the temple, and he permitted forbidden relationships. So why? And Chizkiyahu punished him afterwards. He didn't give him a proper burial. But why wasn't he mentioned as one who doesn't have a portion of the world to come? So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Rabbi Yirmiyah, the son of Abba, said a reason why. Because he was sandwiched between 2 great righteous kings. His father was Yoisam, who was righteous, and Chizkiyahu. So because he was sandwiched between 2 great kings, we don't mention him as one who doesn't have a portion of the world to come. Rabbi Yosef again, Yeshayahu is the prophet Isaiah. Prophet Isaiah is the family of the king. He's Ben Amoitz. He's a Matzias. He's the uncles of the king. So he's not like a nobody. I mean, of course, he's a prophet. He's not a nobody, but he's also part of the Beis Harav. He's part of the house of the king. So he's prophesizing to Achaz, his nephew. He's telling him what's going on. But and at least Achaz had shame. We're going to see what does it mean he had shame. He was bashful. He was shamed in front of Yeshayahu, and because of that, that shame, that kind of inner. It's a level of tshuva, even though he didn't stop him from doing bad things. But at least he didn't do it openly. He wasn't bald about it. He was shameful in front of Yeshayahu, so that because of that, he has a portion in the world to come. God tells Yeshayahu, say no likros achais, go out and meet achais. Ushar Yoshev, go back and your son Shar Yoshev, one of the sons of Yeshayahu is called Shar Yoshev. Others say the name Shar Yoshev means his students. Banecha. El Katzei Tlas Abrecha to the pool. El Yoine. El Mesila Stei Kovis to the place where they do the wash. Now, obviously doesn't mean that Achaz is a king. He's not doing his own laundry. The Gemara says Ma Kovis. What does it mean the wash? Iked Amri de Kav Shinu La Api V'Cholaf. He hid himself when he saw Yeshayahu. He hid his face. So he shouldn't see him. So he was bashful. Iked Amri says Uchle de Katzrei Sechaf Areshi V'Cholaf. That he placed the launderer's vessel, he took the laundry basket and covered his face. That really helps. Covered his face so as if he shouldn't see Yeshayahu. But either way, he showed that he was ashamed. He wasn't spiteful in front of the prophet. And that kind of humility is because of that he's not mentioned as one who doesn't have a portion in the world to come. Rashi says, Shemutel da Aviv Yasem ibn Chizkiyahu. He's between 2 tzaddikim. His father was Yasem a tzaddik, and his son was Chizkiyahu, so he doesn't get mentioned. V'sham Yisrael, what does it mean? Shar sheshav v'liyos benecha v'talmidcha. What does it mean? Shar Yashev. Shar Yashev means the other Yeshayahu doesn't go himself. He goes with his students. V'chol mi sheyashev be'escha la'na talmidav Well, it basically means the other people that are righteous, like Yeshayahu, they don't sin. My koivis, the kavshinu la'ape shekavish is part of Yeshayahu. He hid his face because he was shamed in front of Yeshayahu. So at least he was shameful for his actions. Koivis k'may koivesh. What does it mean? It's a sieve that they would use in those days to wash in the pools, right? I guess they would put the clothing in the sieve and soap it and then pull it out, and the water would drip out. Is like today a laundry basket. Whatever, he took that laundry basket and put it on his head. So he was hiding from Mishayahu, right? Like a kid who's trying to hide. He was shameful. So the shame, Rashi, so the Rabbeinu Steinzat says the question is, how is it that they would find the king in so contemptible place as a laundry? Therefore, he's understood as an illusion. It's just an idea that he wasn't actually in the laundry, but he had a laundry basket around him. Okay. So basically, we don't mention Achais because he's sandwiched between two tzaddikim, which we're going to see. What does that mean in a second? But he was sandwiched between two tzaddikim, and also because he had shame. Because he had shame, so that shame is a kind of a tshuva that he's not so bad. But what about Amin? Amin, who's Amin? So we learned about Amin last week. Amin is the one who puts the pesel. He's Menashe's son. So Achais puts the pesel on the roof of the temple, and he permits forbidden relationships. Menashe puts the pesel in the sanctuary, and he has incest. And then Amman goes further and he puts the pesel in the Holy of Holies, and he has relations with his mother. So the Gemara says, so if he's such a bad person and his father's Menashe is not as bad, he's worse than his father, why is he not mentioned? Because he's the father of a very righteous king. His son is the very righteous Yeshayahu, the last righteous king of Yehuda. Others say that it doesn't come by chance that you have a righteous child. And the very fact that basically there's a thinking that says that the real wicked want to make their children wicked. You have some wicked that they know what they're doing is wrong. They lose control of their life, but they want to give their children a proper education. And the very fact that Yeshayahu was righteous doesn't come out of a vacuum, out of nowhere. The father has to have some credit for not bringing him down, allowing him to become righteous. And that's that merit he's not mentioned as a person who doesn't have a portion of the world to come. The Gemara says, if that's the case, so why do we mention Menashe? Menashe is the son of a righteous king, right? Amon is the father of a righteous king, but Menashe is the son of a righteous king. So why is he counted as one who doesn't have a portion in the world to come? So the Gemara says, why? Because this is a powerful Gemara. Bara mizaki abba. A child gives a schus to the father. Again, a child's behavior is a statement on the parents. Abba le mizaki bara, but a father doesn't give merit to the child, because the child obviously is not taking any credit from his father, because he's rebelling against his father. So obviously the father wasn't able to have an effect on him. So therefore, Chizkiyahu can affect Menashe, but Ammon is affected by his son. There's no one who could save. It says by Avram. Avram couldn't save Yishmael, even though Avram was righteous, but he can't save his son. Ein Avram matzil Yishmael. Ein Yitzchak matzil Esav. Yitzchak can't save Esav. Esav is Esav. Avram is Avram. Yitzchak is Yitzchak, but he doesn't save him. A son is saves a father. Now that we see that a son can save a father, now we know why Achaz is not mentioned, because his son is Chizkiyahu. His father, the covet of Chizkiyahu, that therefore he's protected because he's a father of a righteous person. This is the idea that a father can't protect his child. First of all, there's a lot of Mefarshim on this. The Mefarshim before Rashi, the Mefarshim go into, first of all, Yishmael wasn't wicked. Yishmael, it says, died tzaddik. But it means the descendants, the Yishmaelim, the descendants of Yishmael weren't saved by Avram. Esav himself is wicked, but Yishmael does tshuva. It says Vayigva Vayomes. Rashi learns Engvi ele b'tzadikim. The verse Vayigva, the way Yishmael dies, shows that he was a tzaddik. He died. He did tshuva. Again, but the underlining opinion of most of the Mefarshim is that the reason why a son gives merit to a father is that the son's choices is obviously has some connection to the father, whether the father doesn't want to affect the son or whether the father allows for his son to have a proper education is a statement on the father. The only one exception, and the Mefarshim bring it down, which we learn about, is David was able to affect Avshalom, even though David's the father. Number one is, it says that David prayed very hard for Avshalom, and it said he took him out of the Be'er Shachitz, he took him out of the abyss. He was able to get him out of most levels of hell. And the reason why, again, David has his son Avshalom. Avshalom rebels against his father, King David, the famous rebellion. One of the famous rebellions against King David is his own son Avshalom. He's killed at the end by Yoav, and David cries for him, and he says he cried 7 times to take him out of the 7 levels of the abyss. So we just said a father can't help a son. So the Mefarshim answer one is that what's his name, Avshalom is not an idol worshiper. I mean, he's rebellious, but he's not an idol worshiper. Number 2 is that it means that if a father schus passively you can't help your child. David wasn't passive; he was aggressive. He aggressively prayed for Avshalom. If you aggressively pray for your children, then you could save them. But to be passive and expect that by just being a righteous person and passive about it, that's going to help your children. That's not going to help your children. David invested in helping his child, even though he was rebellious, even though he prayed and wouldn't give up until God took him out of the chambers of hell. Okay, that's basically the Mefarshim in a nutshell. Let's just finish off Rashi over here. Yeshayahu is the son of Ammon, and because Yeshayahu is righteous, he saves his father. Chizkiyahu is the father of Avi Menashe. B'rov Mizaka Abba, Yeshayahu Mizaka Ammon. Yeshayahu could save Ammon Aviv, but Lo Chizkiyahu Menashe. Chizkiyahu can't save Menashe. B'noi, Dechsiv Eim Miyadi Matzel, v'Dashin Eloi Ba'agada Ein Avram Matzel. Avram can't save the children of Yishmael. Again, Yishmael himself does do children. Hashta the Asi Lahachi the Brahmazaka La'ava Achaz Nami Leitem the Kafshino. You don't have to say that he hid his face. Because of Chizkiyahu, we don't count. Let's just see Reb Steinsatz's few points here. He says in Jerusalem Talmud it explains that those whose father and son were both righteous are not enumerated among those who with no share in the world to come. Consequently, Menashe was not spared, as only his father was righteous, his son was not righteous. Again, so if you have a father and a son team, the Yishami says that also helps. Here he says if a son is wicked person, if the son is a wicked person, if the son of a wicked person, is righteous, his father must have contributed to his development, like I said, or at least did not prevent his son from choosing his path, meaning the path of the father. Therefore, he deserves some credit, and therefore he doesn't get counted as a person who doesn't have a portion in the world to come. By contrast, a wicked son of a righteous person cannot claim that he sinned unwittingly, as certainly his father educated him, like Menashe, the Mashal says. Many question this statement based on the quantity of sources that say that the merit of father benefits the son. We do find many psukim that say that there's schus avos, there's a concept of schus avos, the merit of the parents. Some explain that the merit of fathers benefits their sons in terms of success in this world and other attributes that are inherited. As sages say, a father bequeaths to his son wealth, strength, and beauty. But with regard to assuring the world to come, one who raises a righteous son due to his role is engendering his righteousness, shares in his son's reward. Clearly, that is not a case in the opposite scenario. Okay. Let's just see if we have one small piece here. No, the next piece is a longer piece. We'll stop here. We're going to continue with finding out about Yehokim. Yehokim is the son of a righteous person, but he's not the father of a righteous person, at least not in the beginning. And so why doesn't he get counted? We learned the famous, fascinating story with his skull, that his skull gets actually, I'm going to read it quickly. I'll just take a few more minutes because it finishes off this subject. Why don't we add Yehokim in the group of people that don't have portion of the world to come? Because of what Reb Chia, the son of Avo, told us. It says about Yehokim that it says Al Yehokim Zois Vaidacheres. It was inscribed. What happens is Yehokim is this horrible king. he gets into a battle with Nebuchadnezzar, and he gets taken hostage. He dies in captivity, like on the way, and he doesn't get. Yirmiyahu says he's going to have the kvuras of a chamor. He's going to be like a chamor. He's never going to get buried. And when after everything that happened to him, he hung his body everywhere. It was written in his skull, this and something else. What's the something else? He was already desecrated. So what happened? That's Gained Raprida, the grandfather of Raprida. Eshkach Galgusa, he found this skull outside Jerusalem. The Havakashadi B'Shar Yerushalayim, that was by the gates of Jerusalem. Uchsivba, and he sees in the skull, it says Zois V'Edacheres, this and something else. Kavra, every time he tried to bury the skull, it wouldn't stay buried. It would come back, it would pop back out. He buried it again. He couldn't bury the skull. It kept on coming out. So Rashi says, why don't we mention Yehoiakim? He's a horrible king. He had atonement because he never got a burial. Anyone else who's not mentioned is because they weren't totally wicked. We find the reason why Achaz was asked because he did horrible things, but he had a schus aves. His father, his son Chizkiyahu was great, schusbanim, so he's not punished. But what about Yehoiakim? It says Zois v'oid nekama nasis b'ikvar v'oid acheres taslei. God took revenge on Yehoiakim by his body being spread all over the place, and he has no burial. And God says there's going to be another thing that happens to him. What happens? This Rabbi Prida, the grandfather of Rabbi Prida, so it says Omar. He said, who could this skull be that won't be buried? He says, Gulgase shel Yehoiakimi. This must be the skull of Yehoiakim. Because it says, Kavur's chamar yikaver sachiv v'hashlech. He's going to have a donkey's burial. That's what Yirmiyahu says, the prophet. His body's going to be spread over there. He's not going to be able to be buried. But he says, one second, he's a king. Amar Malkahu, he's still a king. I can't just let the skull be like that. I have to give at least a little honor. He was a king. He puts it he wraps it in a silk wrapping, and he puts it in a box. His wife sees that he's pampering this skull. She doesn't know what the skull is. Savr, she thinks, this must be the skull of his first wife. He was married a second time. His first wife died. So she thought that he was obsessed still with the skull of his first wife, and he's protecting it. She got offended. It says that his wife saw it, and she said this was the first wife, as he's not forgotten her. So what did she do? She was offended. Shagra Tanura, she turned on the oven. The Kalton, she roasted the skull. She says, no way, he's not keeping the skull of his first wife. And then he realized, that Zois Vaydacheres, he realized, he said, there's nothing you could do. When God doesn't want someone to get a burial, not only is not going to get a burial, he's going to be desecrated a second time, that the wife of Raprida's grandfather burnt the skull in the oven. All right, these are all interesting, fascinating Gemaras. We're going to continue with the Gemara with Chizkiyahu, back to Chizkiyahu again next week. Laila Tov, everyone. Welcome again, everyone who came, and thank you for joining. Rest Hashem, next week we shall continue.
Thank you, Rabbi.